So Eddie, let me tell you, this is interesting, and it's something that people won't say when they're on the television set. They won't say at polite dinner parties. I'm not sure why they whisper it or text it or email it to me, but liberal members of the mainstream media, Democrats that are huge contributors to the Democratic Party, and even people that work for Democrats. I've heard over the past 3 or 4 years, I've got to get my kid out of this private school. They're teaching my 7-year-old boy that because he's white, he's, a racist, he's part of the problem, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you've heard the same thing. I've heard the same thing. And again, it's anecdotal, but it sure does seem to match with more and more stories that are going out there. How do we sort through all of this and make sure that we don't throw out teaching about slavery and teaching about racism over the past 400 years, that we don't throw that out with a war against critical race theory and its extremes?
Right. We're going to make mistakes. They're going to be extremes. They're going to be moments of overreach. I grant that. But part of what we have to do in this moment, Joe, and we've talked about this, is to confront the ugliness of who we are. And part of what I hear in these sorts of arguments is this sense in which that confrontation must be one where we're comfortable, where we feel good about who we are after we confront it. So in some ways, I'm scooting up in my chair, Joe, because I'm getting upset. Because we're seeing right now in real time a reassertion of the lie. The very thing that keeps us from becoming a different America, because we don't want to accept who we are. But a reassertion though of what lie? I can believe in two Americas. I can believe that 1776 and 1619 can be merged together, that you can believe two things at once. I could disagree with critical race theory, but still believe what you and I have talked about, that we have a long way to go to being a just country the way that the founding document said we were going to be. Do I have to choose one or the other? No. So part of what I'm thinking is that if once you concede the initial claim that America in some ways comes into being in light of this extraordinarily painful reality, the contradiction that is at the heart of our beginnings. Once you concede that, the way in which you begin to think about American exceptionalism shifts. Right? Because it's not this idea that we are wholly innocent, that we're absolved of our sins, that recognizing who we are somehow condemns us to hell, as it were, that we're being bludgeoned by our sins and made to feel guilty. That's not what we're saying at all. But we're saying that you have to confront it in order to release us into a different future. I want to say this really quickly. This sort of argument is happening right now, and I want us to link it to January 6th. I want us to link it to the attack on voting rights. This is, in effect, in my view, Joe, an attempt to arrest substantive change in the country. And we give these folk the credit that they're making the arguments in good faith, and I don't think they are. And I'll say it to Christopher right to his face. I don't think this is a good faith argument. Period. Okay, so I think this is why it's good we're having this conversation. And I'm going to ask you, too, if we can continue having this conversation, if that's okay, and the days and weeks ahead. My concern, just bluntly, Eddie, is that the overreach often drives natural allies away. I have seen overreach in some arguments, in my opinion. A lot of people might not like me saying that. I've seen some overreach on both sides. That's not whataboutism. It's the truth. And that's why I want us to keep this conversation going and work through it. Christopher, you can be against critical race theory being taught in school and still believe that that we've had slavery for or that black Americans have been oppressed one way or the other for 400 years, that we have a long way to go, that we are a nation that had slavery as its original sin. Are those two thoughts not
Can they not exist side by side? Do you not believe that America has the sin of racism and has for 400 years, and we need to keep working to get past that?
Of course, yeah. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in the country who doesn't believe that. I think that's obvious. But again, that's just the premise of critical race theory. The premise is that America has a history of racial injustice, racism, inequality, slavery, et cetera, which is absolutely incontrovertibly true. But the critical race theory's conclusion that we should abandon equal protection under the law, we should abandon free speech, we should abandon the system of capitalism, which I've documented and cited and sourced, whether Eddie likes it or not, is something that we should reject and something that we should not be promoting in schools. And the NEA says it in very plain language. They say we need to reject the system of capitalism as a form of oppression. We need to even reject anthropocentrism, the idea that human beings are the most important thing in our lives. They've taken on all of the most radical hard left ideologies. Now they're institutionalizing them, promoting them in all 50 states. And I'm making an absolute good faith argument, good faith disagreement with my folks and counterparts on the left. But you have to wake up. This is not just conservatives and Republicans. In fact, the greatest opponents of critical race theory in education are liberal, center-left liberals in places like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York City, hardly bastions of conservatism, and also racial minorities, particularly Asian Americans, who've lobbied against it in schools all over this country. It's not a typical black-white issue. That's not the division here. It's simply among different groups of people that disagree on this philosophy.
Eddie, we have to go, but I want to give you the last word. I'm sure you can sum this entire debate up in 15 seconds in good faith. Go.
In good faith, Joe, I think in order for us to imagine ourselves differently, we're going to have to confront honestly who we are, what we've done. And that's going to require discomfort. We're going to make some mistakes on the way, but we have to do it. We have to grow up, Joe. We have to grow up as a nation.
So can I ask you guys to come back next week and continue this discussion? Does that sound possible? And we'll go longer, and I'll get into more specifics. This is just sort of a general introduction to a lot of people who are asking a lot of questions on the left and the right about this issue. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Sounds really
Anytime.
good. And Joe, you know, the conversations that we had earlier in the show about January 6th, as Eddie brought up, and the op-ed that we read about China and the importance of truth. I think there's a lot that we need to unpack here, and this is not over.